Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be with you. I was asked kind of last minute to join in on this webinar. And so I have prepared something, and I was thinking, just listening to the great presentations earlier, that I was going to adapt my presentation a little bit on the fly. Well, first of all, my name is Viola Krebs. I'm the academic dean of a small university based in Geneva, Switzerland. It's called University of Business and International Studies. And I want to figure out how to actually get the next slide. Here we go. So yes, that's me. I'm also a professor and trainer in international business and communications. I've done my studies internationally, and I've worked also very much in a multicultural environment, a lot in Africa, a lot in Asia, across the world really. And what I found was that technology is a fantastic means to help us share knowledge. The question is, what kind of technologies do we use, and how do we use it in order to get the message across? And so today, what I have prepared is I wanted to tell you a little bit about UBIS, and then UBIS and its teaching technologies, and finally, what we can say about online teaching in a multicultural environment, because at the end of the day, it is about human beings. It is about students from different backgrounds with different communication skills, with different reference points, with different means to access the technology, to get access to the World Wide Web, whether it be through a telephone sometimes, whether it be through a computer, whether it be just with audio as well at times. I have to say also, of course, with what's happening at the moment in the world, that has yet taken another twist for us as well, because Switzerland has ordered to have all schools closed, like in many countries that's the case. And so we adapted to this new environment. Also, the other thing I have been experiencing as a lecturer and professor in recent weeks is the fact that I have some students who are actually in quarantine in government bases in this particular case, it's Vietnam. And so that poses a completely different context and challenge as well, both from a human and technology point of view. So UBIS, what is UBIS? It's, as I said, a small private university based in downtown Switzerland. It started in 2006 and has since developed into an international network, really, with campuses in 12 countries and students from about 40 different countries. What we do is we offer undergraduate, graduate programs, as well as a DBA program. And we do also executive training for professionals. In terms of the student base, if you look at this graph, you can see we have about 700 students, but the grand majority are actually in Asia. We have different kinds of modes of delivery. So BBA stands for a bachelor, MBA, the master's level, and then the DBA. So the bulk is at the master's level for our students. And if you look at the delivery mode, well, we have on ground a small group of students blended with flipped classroom and different kinds of technology. And then some students who can't do the blended or joining live for professional reasons, for personal reasons, for sometimes also technical reasons, because some of them are in countries where certain technologies online are not available. I'm thinking of countries such as Saudi Arabia, to just mention one, but the same issue is also the case for students in Dubai, for example. We are accredited internationally and also have some local accreditations. Of course, like any university, we have a website that is also something we use, and we're just in the process of adapting to new ways of doing marketing. I'll come back to that towards the end of my presentation to tell you a little bit more about the challenges we have been facing as far as that goes. So in terms of course delivery, a couple of years ago, we switched to Moodle. We were previously with a different system that was not open source. It caused a lot of challenges just in terms of trying to, for example, transfer data. It was not satisfactory. I have to say that the Moodle platform has been a very good asset for us. And even for on-ground students, we require them to actually upload all of their assignments onto Moodle, because in terms of traceability, that is an asset. And then also in terms of just keeping things easy and not sending thousands of emails back and forth, it's so much better. Of course, that means that you have to train faculty, and I think many of the previous speakers have talked about that. You will always have the technophobic faculty saying, well, you know, I'm not comfortable with teaching online. I'm not comfortable with the technology. It's not working. It won't work for us. And then at the end of the day, the question is, well, is this faculty really suited for the times we are facing today? And our overall answer to this has been, well, either the faculty can actually grow and evolve to getting comfortable, and sometimes it's a steep learning curve, but you know, for everybody, we may have challenges with the technology at times, with bandwidth, with etc. But it can be done, and but it means people have to have the right attitude. And I think that's certainly true. I mean, you can't expect the faculty to deliver interactive kind of presentations and involvement of students, which is something also that is so important. And I think previous speakers have mentioned that. From my experience, if you just talk at students and they sit there and fall asleep, that's not going to do it. So the question is, how can you involve them? How can you force them to make presentations and actually be uncomfortable to some extent? So I have a lot of students, we have a lot of students from Asia who have been taught to mostly sit in a classroom and listen. So when it comes to an interactive kind of mode of course delivery, it's a different story, because they have to actually come out of their way of sitting and not being comfortable to speak up, to learning how to do that, in order also to become, and that's what I'm telling them, good leaders and managers of tomorrow, because you're supposed to know how to work online. You're supposed to have a certain set of skills these days in order to perform in the current business environment. And this was the case before COVID-19. But of course, COVID-19 has given it a different twist. It has given it a different dimension, which is probably going to change the way we will move forward as a global society. So, of course, any of the documentation needs to be available online. And you know, if you then sit with a student in a face-to-face meeting, of course, you can give it also in paper format. But you know, it can be printed, or it can be sent through whatever means is most appropriate at the time. So, in terms of the online delivery, as far as the Moodle platform, I mean, that's kind of the backbone. But then and part of that is the fact that you can adapt it to different screens. And So students who, for whatever reason, don't have a computer available, most of them do, but some of them sometimes don't. They can actually access it through their mobile phone and still participate in the class. Then the Zoom classes, and we have also used Handouts and Meet as a online delivery platform. Also give the opportunity, of course, to record all of the sessions, which again is added value. It means training faculty, and that may mean in an individual way, but also through conferences and guest lectures and webinars, just like this wonderful webinar you are organizing today. So how do we evaluate students? Through assignments, quizzes, case studies, presentations, a midterm exam and a final exam, which may be in the format of a presentation. For example, we have a class called Digital Strategies, and students are actually building websites and making a full business case they then present in a hands-on way. And of course, our pride is when we see that some of those ideas that have been developed in classroom don't stay in classroom, but are applied and turned into real businesses outside the classroom. Measuring client satisfaction, of course, as a private entity, and I think that would be the same for a public one, is utmost important. I think it's all about live and learn. Nothing is going to be perfect. Sometimes things are not working super smoothly, and then the question is not so much that it was a failure, but how to make it a success, and how to turn around, how to work with the technology, how to work with the toolbox available. And that, again, is a moving target. It changes so quickly. So we can't say, well, this technology is what we're using, and we know that we're going to use it in 10 years' time. Still, probably not, because something else will have come out that can respond better to the needs of students, of faculty, of executives and professionals coming to get training on the job and learning how to improve their skills as they go along. Some of the challenges when it comes to intercultural communication is, of course, about the language and the communication skills. The fact that people are in different time zones, and that can be really challenging when you have a class with students from the US, from Europe and Asia, because for somebody, the time zone is not going to be ideal. So there, the answer may be to provide that material online in recorded form, which of course makes it less interactive, because the students then, watch the video and do the assignment, but you can't directly ask them to react to what you're saying. So the ideal for me, I would say, the blended format can be great, because in that case, students can actually work online and can do it whenever they have time, whether they have families, jobs, etc. And at the same time, also have that human contact, which is necessary in terms of motivation. And this is especially true, I think, for younger students, because as people get older, they have maybe more things they're doing, but if they decide to study, they know why they're studying. Whereas, students who are in 18, 20 years old, that motivation probably came from the parents who told them that they had to study. And then, there's so many wonderful things to do outside, apart from sitting in front of a screen and learning and memorizing things. The different cultural references are something that can be a challenge at times, and at the same time, they're a wonderful asset. When you have students from different parts of the world in a classroom, you can actually work with those cultural differences and ask them specifically, how is it in your country? What is your experience? And how would you use technology in Uganda? What would you do in Egypt, or what happened with the Arab Spring or Arab Fall, whatever you want to call it, in Egypt, in North Africa? What about cultural norms in terms of salutation and greeting and directness as well? Can we directly say what we think, or is that considered rude? And that depends a lot on the culture. Certainly in Japan, you wouldn't tell somebody no. In general, you'll find a different way of expressing that. So if somebody is not familiar with that culture, they won't get it, basically. So that kind of global environment and global teaching can give that richness for students who may not necessarily all have the opportunity to travel at that very moment. So the key, I think, is also to use multiple tools in conjunction, not just one tool. And it's about the means that can get knowledge shared rather than the tech tool, the latest gadget. And so the content, and I think it was very well said earlier in this session, that the content is what really is the key at the end of the day. And the interactivity. So adapted case studies to the knowledge of the students, because if they don't have the reference point to understand the environment, they won't get it, which is something I have seen actually as a challenge when using American-based textbooks, because the feedback received from students in Asia was that they were not adapted. And even for European students, sometimes they're not, because it talks about American history, it talks about American standards and norms, which may or may not be applicable to a different cultural setting. We do mobility programs as well, where students actually can go to different places and do a term in a different country. That would be on ground in that case, and then the follow-up may be online again. And of course, that is also, when it comes to classes such as international law, it's all about giving those different settings and explaining the different reference points, which at the end of the day, in many cases, have to do with national legal frameworks, and of course, maybe certain treaties, etc., at the UN level, at the World Bank level, etc. Something else I think that is important when working with technology is the concern and understanding about cybersecurity. And when I say cybersecurity, I could go on, around even the digital footprint, what we can say about confidentiality, about the use of tools such as Facebook, etc. I think students need somehow to get an introduction on what best practices are when it comes to that, because as technology goes on, and sometimes one gets surprised to hear about confidentiality and cybersecurity breaches, and I think that should be a concern to, or I would recommend it be something considered by any online program, really. So another thing is that the alumni base and alumni database is such a wealth. I think this is something we as an institution would like to develop further than we have done so far, and it's something that offers a great potential. I'd like to give you this quote before closing my presentation, which is Tim Berners-Lee, so the creator of the World Wide Web. When I interviewed him for my PhD, he said, "What counts is not always what you can obtain from society, but how you participate in it." And I think that applies to so many fields, but certainly it applies to the field we are talking about today, online education in general. And when using technology in an educational setting. I want to end with two pictures. So I think the online and offline, and then also the blended setting can give the possibility also to organize things like charity events, which is something we're regularly doing in Vietnam with our local partner there. Just a couple of last thoughts about marketing, and this is something we are working on right now. I think when working online, it is a good idea also to see how you can adapt your marketing style, going from a very traditional marketing approach to something which is more technology oriented, integrating a CRM, having online admissions directly relayed and reviewed, having students with the possibility, and actually for the university and the entity, to cooperate with study portals and different social media, as well as online webinar. And I think I'll end with that. Just to say that I'd like to send you warm greetings from Geneva, Switzerland. Though actually at the moment I'm sitting in neighboring France, but just across the border.
Thank you for amazing presentation. Thank you for your teaching tools, for marketing also tools. Really, I think it will be really necessary and useful information for all our educators. Thank you all speakers today.